Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 372, and I had a conversation with Jennifer Howard-Hammer. Jennifer is a retired peace officer with over 20 years experience. She started as a reserve deputy sheriff and went on to be a correctional counselor at the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. She received a Bronze Star from the California State Prison in Sacramento and the Medal of Valor from the CDCR. She retired in 2021 from that world, and these days she specializes in event planning, floral design, and photography services. She's a really lovely woman. We had such a great conversation, and she came from a very intense childhood, as many of us have, and her story is really inspirational. I'm excited for y'all to hear it. Check out Hey Human Podcast for links and to learn more about my guests and the show. Check out SusanRuth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. Follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media. Find my albums on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your music. Also, check out my relationships and sex show with sexologist and healthcare practitioner Mara Edelman on YouTube under Are We There Yet Podcast Show. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for listening. Be well, be safe, take care of each other, and here we go. Jennifer Howard-Hammer, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to dig in. I met you when I was doing work for another show, and just by virtue of chatting with you, I thought this woman is fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
You have lived a very interesting life. I'd love to dig in.
Yes, it's been a very interesting, long journey. Lots of ups, lots of downs, but lots of perseverance as well.
Well, let's dig in. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Chico, California. Spent about half my life there. The other half here in Northern California, Sacramento area. For a short period of time, I lived in Phoenix, Arizona. Not necessarily my happiest moments, but it was a journey. We came back, and thank goodness we did. And it's kind of like I started my life in Chico, went down Sacramento, Phoenix, came back to Sacramento, and finished it back up in Chico for my younger years. And all of my adult life has been here in the Roseville, Sacramento area.
What took you traveling all over like that?
So I was a child. My mother had 6 kids by 6 different gentlemen, or not so gentlemen. So my older brother was put up for adoption, and my mom was very young when she had my brother, and still 19 when she had me. And so I think she was just in a situation where she didn't necessarily have all of the life skills that she needed to, and definitely didn't have the resources. And I ended up becoming part of the foster system. I was very blessed because of that foster system. I was with my family, and very blessed that I wasn't part of the foster system that a lot of children are part of these days. So
does that mean that you were fostered with your siblings?
No, I was actually, my mom left me on my aunt's doorstep before she moved to Phoenix. And when I say on her doorstep, that is literally on her doorstep. I was 5 or 6, and she took my little brother and moved to Arizona and started her life there. My aunt took care of me, and then I moved to my grandma and grandpa. They took care of me, and then I went back to my grandmother. She took care of me, and my grandma thought it was time that I go back with my mom, which was literally the worst thing that could have ever happened. I went back with her, moved me out of the state, so I was away from all my family and support. Basically, the people that I knew all my life. And then went to Arizona. Life was not exactly fun, very, very hard. And then when I was 16, there was an intervention, which is another interesting story. We can get into that whenever you want. And then came a ward of the court.
An intervention with your mother?
So it was, I was living with my mom at the time. Every time I was with my mom, I was either physically or sexually abused the entire time. And finally at 15, 16, I had had enough of the physical and sexual abuse and it was always either her boyfriends or husbands or their friends or whoever. I had finally had enough and tried to call my aunt because it's a very, very abusive situation, actually. My little brothers were getting beat on quite a bit with the belt. And as long as I was there, I would always step in. So that meant I got it twice as bad. I was nailed in my room. They nailed the door shut and windows shut. The cops finally came after I was able to break out. I was trying to get to a door, and my mother put her arm in to try to grab my hair, and I ended up shutting the door on her, and it caused damage. So while I was at school that day, she called the cops at the urging of my stepfather, and then they lied, pressed charges, and said that I held her arm and broke it and beat on her. But I was the one with all the bruises. I was the one with the handcuffs that they didn't have keys for. The sheriff had to actually call a different deputy to come out to unlock my handcuffs. I begged him to take me with him. And back then they didn't intervene like they do now, unfortunately. Next day, the sheriffs come to the school, and I'm thinking, yay, finally, I'm going to get some sort of protection. And they arrested me, 16, and took me to juvenile hall and said that all of this occurred. It was a lie. And so while I was very frightened, very naive, I was a very naive child. I didn't understand. I was scared to death. But I was in the juvenile hall, and when they had my court date, they basically said, well, we'll go ahead and release you, but you have to follow all these rules. And I said, no, I'll stay here till I'm 18, if that's okay. Because I'd rather stay here than ever go back there with them. And at that point, someone finally listened. Someone finally heard my words. They were able to get a hold of my aunt, who was like my mom. She was always my solid, and my grandparents, and they came, and the judge awarded them custody of me, and I was blessed enough to stay with them until I finally graduated high school. I stayed with my aunt for about a year, and then maybe not quite a year, and then I moved back with my grandma and grandpa because they had the most stable environment. And then I went back home to kids that I, finally went to school with when I was in second and third grade. So I was able to finally graduate.
Were people hearing your cries for help all along, or did they just tell you to sort of listen to your mother? And as they did at one point in time when people, as you said, didn't listen to kids the way they do now.
Right. So my Aunt Judy and my grandparents, they knew something was wrong just from behavior. I thought I was acting normal, but it's kind of interesting now. I pick up on behavior with all humans. I'm a very avid human watcher. I pay attention to details. And so I'm able to pick that kind of stuff out now very quick when there's something not quite right, whether it's a child or an adult. But they knew something wasn't right, and they did try to get me some counseling. But back then I was afraid. You as a child, you feel like it's your fault, or like you're hiding a big secret and you don't want something bad to happen to someone that you love. And so with that fear that I had, I would go to counseling, and I would absolutely lie. Everything's fine. We're good. And she was a great counselor. She didn't push, but she would talk to me and let me know that she knew something was up. It didn't get very far, but I did at least feel comfortable with her. Later in my life, when I lived with my grandparents, part of the court orders were to get me counseling. And I remember my grandma, saying, like, we've tried to get her counseling. Counseling isn't going to help her if she's not going to open up. And so they said, well, just, keep trying. So my grandma had made an appointment with someone, and I remember her last name, but I remember her name was Rita, Counselor Rita, and Chico. She was kind of a hippie, kind of earthy. She said to me, Jennifer, do you think everybody does this because they have an ulterior motive? Why do you think they're doing this? Why do you think they're bringing you to counseling? And I said, because they think something's wrong with me. And she says, no, they don't think something's wrong with you. They think you've been through something traumatic that is affecting you. And I was like, oh, wow, I never really had somebody explain it to me like that. And at 16, I was older. I could reason a little bit more. But I also, at 16, I was pissed off. I was really, really angry because I was tired of feeling like the punching bag, I guess. I was tired of being used up. I felt used up, kind of. She said, I would really like it if you could open up to me. And if you could, I think that we can help you get from this, where you're at right now. We can go and we can work through some of the things that are deep down inside that are ailing you. And she said, will you just try? And I was like, okay, at this point, what's it going to hurt? And I finally submitted to that day being honest about my life, my past. I just tried to say, okay, this is not my fault. I didn't have a choice in this. And I think as kids get older, you feel like you did have a choice because you were older, but you don't, because you live with the fear. You live with the fear of somebody finding out. You live with the fear of people judging you. My mom knew, and she denied it all the time. Up until the day she died. And I finally was able to tell her that it was okay, Mom, I love you. And I know that, you probably choose not to remember because it was so painful. I mean, think about it. As a mom, to knowingly do some of the things that you partook in, and to know what people were doing to your child and or children, and to the fear that she must have also had. But regardless, you chose to have children. It's your job to protect us, and you chose not to do that. And I just told her, I was like, I love you. You're my mom. I don't necessarily like what has happened. I'm whom I am today because of what I went through. But I love you and I forgive you. Even if you're never going to give me what I thought I needed, I just want you to know I love you and I forgive you. And I was so thankful because I was able to do that about a week before she tragically died unexpectedly. But yeah, so anyhow, this counselor was able to get me to do what's called interactive and role play therapy. And it's something I'd never done before. And it was kind of weird. I mean, I'm not going to lie, but it worked.
Is that the one where you pretend the chair is your parent? Is it that one?
Yeah. Or it can be the chair is your parent, or at this point where she would say, okay, I'm him. What do you want to say to me? How did that make you feel? And so I was able to do that. But before we started that, she also said, there's stages, in order for anybody to get help, you have to admit that there was a problem. It's the first step in anything: drug, alcohol, abuse, any kind of traumatic moment. If you don't admit that it happened, or you don't admit that there is a problem, you can't fix what you don't acknowledge. Mm-hmm. And so she said, that's the first part. And then she says, and then once you do that, then you're going to get really, really pissed off. Oh, and I did. I did not realize how much anger, sheer anger that I was carrying. And then she said, you're going to be really sad. And I remember sobbing, where I couldn't breathe. And then she said, you're going to take a breath and we're going to talk about it. And then we're going to give you tools. And then you're going to accept it. And then you're going to move on. And for the first time in my life, I made a promise to myself that I would always talk freely and openly about anything that happened. I just always had to be very careful with whom I spoke it, because some of the things that had happened specifically were pretty tragic and could be very offensive. Offensive in the sense that some people don't want to know that kind of trauma. They don't want to visualize. So if you tell them, well, this and this specific act and this is how this happened, they're just like, oh my God, oh my gosh. Like, I can't, no more. And it's kind of like even within the prison system, which I also worked. Sometimes the public and people just aren't prepared for that kind of reality.
Unfortunately, though, that's how things get perpetuated. If we don't talk about it, no matter how heinous it is, we have to have those conversations in order to facilitate an end to that kind of trauma and abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. I remember as a young child, my grandfather saying, if you're not honest, then what do you have to give somebody who knows nothing about you other than your word? And so I have always tried to be as honest as I can be in my adult life. My son, I've told a couple white lies to, because that's what we do as parents. And he calls me out and he's like, you're lying. And I'm like, well, yes, I guess technically I am. But the reason I'm doing this is because of this. It's not because I'm trying to deceive you. It's more like, I don't want to let you down in a hard way. And he's like, okay, Mom, but it's still, and I'm like, okay, I get it. I try to be as open and honest about any and everything that I possibly can, because I think it's important. I think it's not my problem if I'm honest with somebody and they can't handle that honesty. I come across sometimes as being harsh, and I'm not. I at least that's not ever really my intention. Trust me, if I want to be harsh to somebody, you're never going to have a doubt about it. You're going to know my intention.
I feel that children who have suffered abuse have a particular kind of stoicism. How did you find a path to forgiveness for your mom?
Because the burden that I was carrying, realizing as we get older that you can't change anybody. No matter how much you love them, no matter how many roads you give them, no matter how much support or opportunity you provide for somebody, you can't make them do anything. The one thing that I wanted from my mom was affirmation. And I told her, I said, Mom, the only thing I really want is for you to say, I know, Jenny. I should have done more and I didn't, and I'm sorry. And what I got was, well, I just didn't know, and I can't change it now, and okay, if you want me to say I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And it's like, no, I want you to say you're sorry because you're sorry. I want you to admit where you failed me. I want you to see what I went through as a child that you were supposed to protect. And still know that I love you. And I've tried to have that relationship and build it. It's always been a strained relationship with my mom, but it never meant I didn't love her. It never meant that I didn't want more for her. But again, I can't want more than she does.
That must have been complicated when she passed away. And what's her first name? I like to say
Virginia.
Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
So when Virginia
passed,
a year. Oh, so not very long.
April was 1 year.
I imagine having complicated relationship with my own mother. I imagine having them gone and knowing that that's it. You won't get that apology or that understanding, or even really hearing what forgiveness means, because they have to forgive themselves as well.
exactly.
You would hope. I mean, that's the hope, at least. How did you handle her death, knowing that all those things weren't going to come to pass, or did it matter anymore because you had met yourself in that space and parented yourself, for lack of a better word, I guess?
I always had told myself, and I told my little brothers and my little sister, I always would say, I've taken care of Aunt Judy until her dying breath. She died from terminal cancer. I've taken on that financial burden. I have tried to include everybody as much as I possibly could. I took care of Aunt Judy, who I considered to be my mom. And I said, you guys let me know what you need from me. But when mom passes, that's she's your responsibility. And I said, I'll send flowers. I'll be there for whatever you need, because I felt like I was just going to emotionally detach. And ironically, God works in mysterious ways, and thank God he does. It was by chance that I'd been off and on in contact with my mom through text. And I just felt like, she was getting older and kind of not necessarily playing with a full deck. But I mean, that, it happens as people age. Just wanting to talk to her and just let her know, like, hey, moving forward, you need to meet your youngest grandson, because you've never met him. You've only been around Park 2 or 3 times. I don't want to deprive you of that as an old lady. And so one night we were just talking, and I don't know, I just felt compelled to tell her all the things I needed to say to her. And we bawled. Like, I cried for hours. We were on the phone for probably close to 2 hours, hour and 45 minutes, thereabout. And I felt the relief that I got to say what I felt like I needed to say. And then if she passed, I was good. I was going to be fine. When I got the call at 12:30 that mom was in the emergency, and that she was hemorrhaging and they couldn't stop the bleeding and it wasn't looking good, that they were doing CPR on her, I remember just like inside, I don't know if you want to call it like controlled chaos, where I kind of just was like, oh my God, really, is this going on? And then about 15 minutes later, my little brother called me and said, Mom, or sis, she's gone. I was in my bathroom, was 11-ish, close to 12. I fell to the floor. I sobbed uncontrollably. I puked. I cried some more. And then I put my clothes on and said, all right, now I need to go there and be there for my little brothers and sister. And I need to make sure that they treat my mom with dignity and respect, and that everything is done the proper way. I didn't think I was going to be that emotional. And still to this day, with how my little sister, who was kind of like my mom's best friend, and I'm glad my little sister never had to deal with any of the stuff that we ever did, ever. My little brother dealt with some of it. My middle little brother, who is dead now, he was a tortured soul. And then my older brother is bipolar schizophrenic with multiple personality. Like, he lives on the streets now. It was a whole gamut of things that I didn't think I was going to deal with. My little sister and I don't really get along real well, and she's been a very entitled child.
It's interesting to think about how each one of us in a family, in a way, have a different parent, even if it's the same parent.
Right.
We're parented differently, and they behave differently upon us. They're like, we have one relationship. Like, my big brother has a totally different relationship with my mom.
Right. Yeah. And it's, I love my little sister. I was 18 when she was born. I was so excited. I was so excited to finally have a little sister. I love her to death. I love all my siblings. I care about them all deeply. So I have 2 brothers that are still alive. well, I should say 3 because my older brother that was put up for adoption, I've reconnected with him. We haven't met in person, but we talk, through Facebook and what have you.
That's interesting too.
Right. Isn't it crazy?
What life he had.
He had an amazing life.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said he was very blessed. He had a great life. His parents were always good and kind to him, and he had a great upbringing. And he was super compassionate. It's like, I'm sorry that, it was so hard for you guys. And I said, don't be sorry. I'm like, I'm thankful that you never had to experience that.
Yeah.
So
your brother that passed away, what's his name?
BJ.
So BJ, who passed away, he, I assume, had a lot of the same things to endure that you and perhaps the eldest brother of yours endured.
So the eldest didn't really, he was kind of the golden child, the oldest younger brother. So my little brother right underneath me, he was kind of the golden child. He was also pretty entitled. His dad came back into his life. My littlest brother, who I kind of raised off and on, who now that it's kind of an estranged relationship right now, but I think he also has some mental health things that he's working through. Because he's had several concussions from riding rodeo and what have you. But my middle little brother BJ, he had a really rough life. I think he had probably a worse life or upbringing than I did, because he was there and his dad wasn't involved. And my littlest brother's dad, who was the one that abused me, adopted him and then changed his name, beat the ever living shit out of him every opportunity. So, he'd been in and out of prison. He had drug addiction, and he was killed in a vehicle accident from one of his dopehead ex-girlfriends. And then she lied. Yeah.
Wow. That's so much for one family to have to go through. But I don't know. I feel like that story is not an uncommon one, which is also so desperately sad.
Right. Unfortunately, people don't feel compelled to talk about it. And they do. My little sister still believes to this day that none of that happened to me.
That's insulting.
It's disgusting, because what that tells me is that, first of all, you don't have compassion. You don't have the ability to be compassionate or empathetic. And you wouldn't know that because you've lived such a privileged life. And you believed everything mom said to you because she was your best friend. Because my little sister's socially awkward. But for you to say to me, you don't believe everything that I'm saying is true, what kind of sick, disgusting person would I have to be to make these things up? Like, it makes me want to physically vomit thinking about it. And I said, I've told her numerous times, you go ahead and you believe that. I'm glad that you have the right and the opportunity and the ability to do that, because you were never a victim of that. And I'm thankful for that. Disgusted with your behavior and your thoughts, but you're also entitled to those as well. So sometimes you just got to accept it and move on.
That your story is devastating, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that. But I got to say, you are one of the stronger women I've ever met. And I mean, I don't know you well, but just from the conversations we've had, it is a weird conundrum, right? We think about the stuff that we endure. And as you said, it creates the person you are today. And so there's the part of us that think, okay, well, who would I be without that? Even though, can I just be that without all that horrible stuff happening to me?
Right.
Yeah. How did that shape you moving forward? You have a husband, you have a family. Were you able to not bring that trauma into relationships, or did that take time to figure out how to navigate?
So I have always said that in life, if you were given that one thing, what would you change in your life? What's the one thing you would change in your life? And I've always said, I wish that I would have understood and realized what college was back when I was younger. I wish I would have gotten more of a college education. I did get some college education later in my life, in my late 20s and, well, I should say actually more like 30s, but, late 20s, early 30s. But at that time, having your own home and having to work all the time, and people do it all the time. But I got to experience that struggle, and it's real. That's the one thing that I would have changed. And people say, well, why wouldn't you change all of the other stuff that happened to you? And I said, because it made me who I am. It gave me the fortitude to fight and succeed. I'm a survivor. That doesn't mean that I don't have bad days. That doesn't mean that there are days that I'm just like, I cannot, I need to get in my bedroom and I need to go to sleep because I cannot deal with this day. I have those days, but I'm also honest and I allow myself opportunity. I give myself the permission to feel that way sometimes, defeated or angry or helpless. And then, I feel sorry for myself. And then I'm like, all right, put your big girl panties on. You got shit to do. Go get your stuff done. It's time to be a big girl. And, I laugh because I talk to myself all the time. And like, sometimes you just got to do that. Sometimes you just have to talk yourself through it. And that's what got me through all the years as a kid is I would always talk myself through it. I would always think about the positive things that happened in my life to get me through the negative things I was going through. And I've always known that I've had choices because of the positive role models I've had, my aunts and my uncles from my grandparents, my Aunt Audra, who's like my sister, who has went through a lot of trials and tribulations. She's like my big sister. We grew up, off and on together through my aunt and my grandparents being selfless and taking on a responsibility of taking care of a human when they didn't have to. Like being a mom, we choose to be moms. And people say, well, I didn't choose to get pregnant. Yes, you did. If you had sex, you chose to get pregnant. Sorry, but that's a choice. I'm very big on everybody has choices and some choices have consequences. You just have to realize through life that, you just like Dory, you just got to keep on swimming. You just got to keep on swimming. Just keep on moving forward.
That's the patron saint of many of us, really.
Right.
Well, how did you figure out how to navigate relationships moving forward, especially adult relationships where vulnerability and trust are such a huge component?
Right. So when I was in my teens, 16, 17, 18, I was very promiscuous. I just thought that's what you do. That's just kind of what you do. And then once I graduated high school by the skin of my teeth, my aunt gave me the opportunity to move down here with her. And she's an executive chef, one of the first female chefs of Sacramento. And she said, hey, I can get you a job at the Holiday Inn. So I came down and I started working and learning from then how to, be kind of a big girl. Even during that period, it was still from 16 to 18. I was kind of a mess. And every time I see my grandma, every single time, I apologize. And I say, Grandma, I'm so sorry for the stress that I put you through. Because back then, we didn't have cell phones. They couldn't check on you. And the guilt that I have from that, I don't know if I'll ever still give myself permission to forgive myself for that. I'm just so thankful that my grandma didn't give up on me, but she also gave me tough love. And I know it killed her sometimes. And I tried to use the things that I learned from them. My grandma and grandpa were married for over 30 years before my grandpa passed. They were amazing. My grandma and grandpa were amazing. My Aunt Judy always showed me love and encouragement and good work ethic. She was my solid through so much. And I just took what I learned from them in those relationships that I have. All of my aunts and uncles have been married to their significant other. their entire life. I was married. I met a guy at the Holiday Inn. I got married to when I was 21. We had dated for about 2 years because I was almost 19. It lasted about a year and a couple months. And I realized like, yeah, this is not the relationship that I want. And, you also learn that you think that that's just what you're supposed to do. At least back then, you work, you find somebody who treats you nice, and then that's what you do. You get married. Well, thank goodness I didn't have any kids. And then I met my husband that I have now. We have been together this year. It'll be 29 years. And we've been married. It'll be 17 years this year. It's a lot of ups and downs. There are days sometimes where, you just don't feel like you can get through it. But life is a journey. It's not a destination. And with anything good in life, there's some sort of fight. And if you turn your back and walk away when you know that you have, like, this is your person. I've known he was my person from like within 1 month of meeting. I knew, I'm like, oh my God, this is the guy. We dated for almost 12 years before we got married because he was in a previous relationship. He actually is 10 years older than me, 10 and a half years older than me. So he has a family that he had prior to. So we're kind of a blended. Yeah, I just try to take it one day at a time. And you have peaks and valleys in relationships. Marriages are hard. They're not easy. And people get into them, I think, way too fast. And they get out of them even faster. Unfortunately, they get out of them faster when they have kids, and that's hard. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess just through life, you have to kind of look and see what you're doing right and what you're not, and try to figure out, what's the right path and what's the wrong path. I will tell you that I am a fierce protector of my children, of all children that are in my care or in my anywhere. I don't care if I don't know you or not. Of my family and my friends, I'm very, very protective. I'm very loyal.
And you've taken that and you started your career. Am I correct in that? Yeah, you started your career dealing with children who needed that.
So I started my career. I worked numerous restaurant jobs, and that I had done that for probably, I think I was 23 when I had met my husband, and actually it's 22 when I met my husband. I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought, well, maybe I'll be a paramedic. I mean, I didn't really care. I didn't know. I was kind of lost of what I wanted to do with my life. But I knew that I didn't want to be a food server for the rest of my life because it's hard on your body. And so at the restaurant that I worked at, we always had a bunch of cops that came in that we would take care of. And one of them had said to me, "Have you ever thought about going into law enforcement?" And I think to myself, I'm like, law enforcement? Really? Yeah, I used to smoke pot. I have made some bad choices in my life. My financial situation wasn't grand. Based off of my upbringing, I should have been an inmate. I didn't break the laws, anything like that. But just from my perspective, I felt like, oh, really? You think I should do? But they said, well, come on a ride along. I went on a ride along and I was hooked. I knew from that day, which was January 31st, I went and did a ride along, and it was 1993. No, it was 94 going to 95. I was like, oh yeah, this is what I need to do. I worked really long and hard. I worked for probably close to 8 years before I finally got a full-time position.
As an officer?
As an officer, yes. I'd volunteered for the sheriff's department for 2 years doing undercover prostitution stings.
Sex worker for all this.
Right, sex worker, right? Yes. But that was also another thing is that I actually wrote a paper on it for college. Everybody says it's a victimless crime, and it's so far from a victimless crime. So we could go on for hours with just that. Well, they deserve to be out there. Well, no, life probably or circumstance put them out there because they didn't have option guidance and felt like they didn't have choice. Everyone has a choice. So that's the one thing I'm not going to give you a buy for. But the choices that they felt, like once again, like with even suicide, where I talk a lot about that too, the desperation in some people's lives to lead them to a choice that is so permanent. The fear, the pimps treat them like garbage. They keep them hopped up on the dope. They get beat on regularly from their Johns, because their Johns know after they get done having, whatever acts done, that they're mad at themselves that they just went and were with a sex worker. So no, I'm going to take my anger out on you. If the sex worker isn't protected, what about the wives and husbands and children that they bring home potential diseases to, and they never tell them? The taxpayers' money that pay for the drug treatments, the medical of these sex trafficked, women and men too, because it's becoming a bigger thing now with young boys and young men. It's not victimless. There are several victims everywhere you go. So anyhow, I did that. I learned so much about it. Made it through an academy. I paid to go through an academy. It was one of the hardest academies in the state of California at the time. The only other two academies that were a little rougher were CHP or Los Angeles PD. I went through the Sacramento County Sheriff's Academy, was offered a contingent job, but I had to pass my psych and the medical. Obviously, the medical wasn't a problem. I go to the psych. The psychologist called me a liar. I told them everything because I was honest, and they told me that I was a complete liar. They're like, why didn't you get arrested? Well, because back then they didn't do that. Well, did you ever think people didn't believe you? Why wouldn't they believe me? Like, why? Well, because you need attention. Did you think that I needed to get attention by that? I mean, that's a pretty sick mind to come up with some of the stuff. Not good. Not good. And so I felt victimized by this process. It was a man. It was Dr. Hartgrave. I'm going to put his name out there because I don't care. He's not around anymore, I don't think, but whatever. He was known to do that. Either he liked you or he didn't. It was one of the only times in the history that they were aware of up until that point that I had a lieutenant and a captain that could not believe it. After I volunteered over 1,000 hours of my time to the department, trying to show them, taking report writing, doing all this stuff on my own, putting myself through an academy with the hopes that I was going to have a job at the end. He failed me on my psych. So then I get this letter saying, well, thank you, but no thank you. You can apply again in a year. I'm like, what? So I can apply again in a year, go to him, and then go through this all over again? Because the application process is brutal. I asked if there's a way to appeal it. And so they said, yeah, there's an appeal process. So I did. I went and paid for it. Went to another psychologist who basically did not understand what this doctor was talking about and passed me. And then they said, okay, great. Well, you passed, but our decision still stands. You can apply again in a year. I'm like, okay, well, I wish you would have told me about that, but whatever. At that point, I didn't care. At least I had somebody else saying that, no, you're not losing your shit. You actually are pretty sound. And so I did. I reapplied again. I went through the whole process again. At this point, then they had said, because there was some drama with my husband's ex-wife. And then, of course, the background investigator at that point was friends with her. Didn't get it too far that time, which I was like, it's just amazing the politics that people play. So by this time, we're at three years in. And so I go and apply to Sutter County Sheriff's Department, and they send me through all the background, the interviews, polygraph, all that good stuff. I finally got offered a job. So I was working there, reserve deputy. And so I worked there part-time, and then I worked at another job. And I did that for just under 5 years, or right about 5 years. In the meantime, I was applying with the I would say the dark side. The Department of Corrections at the time, it's now Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And so went through a long process there and was kind of getting dragged through the mud. And then I just didn't hear anything. I'm like, so does that just mean it's over and that you're not going to hire me? So I hadn't heard anything for about 6 months. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to still fight. I'm going to fight for my passion was to become a cop. I called the background investigator. They ended up getting to the guy that was assigned to me. And I talked to him and he's like, yeah, he's like, well, we had a couple of questionable things. Why don't you come in and let's talk about it? And so I went in, and the things that they were talking about, I was like, why didn't anybody call me? Why did I have to call you guys? These are all things that can be like, they're factual. Like, you don't have to just take my word. I can direct you to where you need to go to find this information if you don't believe what I'm telling you. What I learned through that whole process is that being honest on your job application for law enforcement is not exactly the right thing to do. But I will tell you that I did not lie on my job applications, not any of them. I told them I had experimented with drugs, which is one reason why it took me longer. I told them that I had been fired from a job. I told them that I didn't pass a psych background by one person. I had 3 other psych backgrounds and passed all of them. So, it was just like the ups and downs. Well, I finally get through that, get offered a job with the Department of Corrections, go through their 4-month academy. And I was 30 at the time, and then went and worked for the Department of Corrections. Was there for 9 years or thereabout. Was assaulted twice by inmates. So I have permanent damage in my back from it. Was medically retired for 4 years, went back in 2015. Had to deal with a lot of workplace bullying, a lot of trauma. Was at CSP Sacramento off and on for 20 years. Dealt with a lot of murder, a lot of stabbings, a lot of hangings, a lot of officer misconduct, with a lot of people not being honest. Before I left, I had promoted to a correctional counselor. And as a correctional counselor, I really tried to help inmates in level 4 prisons try to find some accountability for their actions and tried to give them guidance per the new regulations with CDCR. Because I will say, from the time that I started to the time that I was medically retired again from an altercation, the department did try, and still I will say, I will defend that part of CDCR, is that they're getting much better about offering programs to inmates, offering educational programs, offering job opportunities, offering counseling, self-help classes, teaching them like job certifications like plumbing, building maintenance, welding, so on. And these are accredited programs, helping them with their basic education through school, whether it's a high school diploma or GED, and then getting them signed up for college. So I had tried really hard, myself and another counselor that I'm very close with. We always would say, if these inmates are going to be let out at the rate that they are, and they're going to be my neighbor, then we need to teach them to act right. And so anyhow, just really trying to help inmates
to be better humans.
Some of those people need to be incarcerated. There are some that should never, ever be part of society. So with that being said, that doesn't mean they still can't better themselves in prison and stop some of the behaviors that got them to. Because what you see, especially with, generation after generation going into our penal systems, is you see kids that honestly, that's what they were taught. They were taught how to either die on the streets or to continue the behavior they did on the streets inside the penal institutions. And so trying to get them to realize that, hey, if there was ever a state you could get out, this is the state. But you have a lot of work to do. And if you do that work, I promise you, you have every opportunity to get out and be a productive human in society. What you did doesn't have to define you. You have to have accountability for it, but it doesn't have to define you. And, there's some people that are hardcore and they're just like, you're an inmate lover and you're doing too much and my response would always be, well, I'm doing my job. And what does it matter if I help them so that we don't have stabbings? So we don't have officers getting sliced up. We don't have women being assaulted. We don't have other inmates being assaulted. What would it be like if we went to our work in a penal institution and people started behaving and making better decisions? Why are you mad at me for trying to make that happen? Because it's a lost cause? Well, that's your interpretation. I will never give up on humanity.
I also think that they benefit financially from having havoc happen because it requires time to stay around longer after an altercation. They have paperwork. It just adds to their own financial padding.
Oh, there's a lot of corruption in CDCR. A lot. And they don't want you to talk about it, but it happens on a regular basis. And the sad part is it happens from the top on down. I've been directly targeted from that. Again, I still am not going to back down from anyone or anything. I don't know how to do that very often.
Well, you were created to be who you are, right? You had to fight for yourself and stand up for yourself. And I think for the folks that have gone through tremendous fires, they develop, if they're lucky, they either become serial killers, right? Or they develop a deep empathy for others and an understanding that no matter how dismal and abysmal a situation is, there is a way out.
Right. Yes, I agree. I try to, if you don't have hope, you have a dead body hanging in a cell. You have a friend taking their life. You have people making reckless decisions that affect other people. And that's not how I get down. I try to treat everybody with compassion and kindness until I don't have the ability or the reason to treat you with compassion or kindness. But I'll try talking you through it, because when I'm at that point, you should not be surprised that I'm at a point with someone when I get there, because I've given you every opportunity. I've told you, like, we're going to go down this road and you're not going to like what I'm going to tell you, because it's honest. I was honest with my inmates, tried to be as honest as I can with my children, given their age.
Well, and your inmates respected it of you too. I think that it sounded like you facilitated a level of trust and respect where when something was happening, you could step in and say, hey guys, not okay. And they would listen.
Oh, I did all the time. Yeah, I did that all the time. When I'd have an inmate that was, drinking, or an inmate that I could see was going down a hole with drugs, I would tell them, I'm like, look, why does your family care more about you than you do? You need to cut this crap out. Don't ask me for help when you're not willing to help yourself. You need to figure it out. All you need to do is ask me, Miss Howard, I need some help. And I will bend over backwards to get you the help that you need. And I don't give a shit that you're an inmate, because that's my job. I don't care if you're a coworker that needs it. I don't care who you are. Everyone has somebody who loves them. Everyone. I don't know anyone in this world that doesn't have somebody that cares about them, loves them, or likes them. I just don't think so. Even, the bottom feeders. I have zero compassion for child molesters and zero compassion for rapists. Sorry, I don't have it. I still will treat them with respect if that is my job to do so. And I did. I didn't judge anyone unless you gave me a reason to. And I did. I did as much as I possibly could for my inmates when they followed the rules, and I gave them what they had legally coming to them. Absolutely. Every single time. And there was a lot of fallout. I get labeled as an inmate lover. I would get watched by investigations thinking that I was bringing stuff into inmates. I would be ostracized when I would come into a room and all of a sudden everybody would stop talking. I would get told, you're doing too much. You need to butt out. No, you don't need to know that. Even if it was my job, I didn't let it stop me from doing my job. But at the end of the day, it was hard. It's hard to not be accepted sometimes. It's hard to not, to have people talk shit about you for doing your job.
Absolutely. And especially in that circumstance, because I feel that prison is just this whole other world in and of itself. It has a whole different set of rules and circumstances and ethics and codes of honor. And it's so multi-layered. And the minute you walk through those doors, everything is different.
Oh yeah, 100%. And prisons are based off of gangs. Sad part is that everybody wants to think that it's just the inmates that have gangs. No, it's not. For people who have used excessive force, that's technically a crime. You can't beat the shit out of somebody because you have a badge on your chest and then lie about it in your report. And I think that people have done that off and on throughout their career, and they know it. And I get it. Back then, it wasn't as highly publicized and it was accepted, but it's not anymore. So follow the rules. And stop judging these inmates. There are inmates that I will tell you to this day, I'd love to freaking give them a 5 of clubs because they give me so much grief or were so disrespectful or were like just such complete assholes. Like just caused me so much grief. I mean, I was blessed, thank God again, that I was never gassed. But I have lots of friends that were.
Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so being gassed is when an inmate will throw some sort of liquid or substance on you. So that could be pee, it could be water, it could be feces, blood. A lot of them would that would have HIV would do that. They would cut, bleed, and try to gas you with it, or dip darts in it and blow dart you to try to give you Hep C or HIV. Or throwing food,
or
just
semen.
Any kind of semen's a big one. Yep. I've seen. I mean, thank God there was glass between me and the inmate numerous times because I can tell you on several occasions where I've had inmates masturbating and yeah, it's disgusting. It's a whole being victimized again, but
yeah,
and it pisses you off, but. Is my retirement and my family worth that? Is my quality of life worth an inmate? They're there because they made bad choices. Why am I going to not have control and make a bad choice that's going to affect my entire family and my future?
And also making those choices make you no better than the person that you are that has pissed you off in the first place.
Correct. Right. I mean, through life, people are going to piss you off.
Sure.
Really bad sometimes. Sometimes they're going to make you so mad that you want to put your hands on them. For me, I would normally get in my car and drive home and cry because I was so mad that I needed to have some sort of physical release and I couldn't put my hands on someone. So I would go run, I would go work out, or I would just cry.
You were honored with the Medal of Valor.
I was.
Can you tell me about that?
I'm not somebody who likes to have a lot of attention on myself. I like being part of a lot of things that go on, but I don't like the spotlight necessarily on me so much. I would much more prefer it being on everybody else. It was something I'm proud of. I had done CPR on 2 inmates in my career, and both of them did not make it. I mean, they had life-threatening wounds, but it still takes a toll on you psychologically. I was off work actually because I was in an altercation with an inmate and had just had surgery on my wrist, and COVID, it shut everything down. So my friend who's with me, Cindy, says, let's go, Mimosa House is open. Let's go and have some mimosas and breakfast. I'm like, okay, let's do this. I actually had my back side to them, the table, and she's talking to me. And then the next thing I notice is she's like, something's going on over there. So I turn and I look at a table. She's like, Jen, he's choking. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And everyone is just watching. So I get up and I go and I'm like, I'm Jen. I'm a peace officer. And I look at the guy. I'm like, can you breathe? And he shakes his head no, because he can't talk. And I said, you cannot get any air in. He's like shaking his head no. And you could see him laboring to try to get it out. And so I give him a couple thrusts. I said, I'm going to try to help you. Is that okay? And he shakes his head. Meanwhile, his wife, and he has I want to say he's probably like 2 years old, little 2-year-old son. And his mom and his dad were there, and they're all watching. Oh, this can't happen today. This cannot happen today. And so I pounded on his back a couple times, and it didn't help. And so I told his dad, I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I went behind and I said, I'm going to thrust really hard. Okay. It's going to hurt. And I did it probably, oh my gosh, 3, 4, I want to say maybe even a little bit more. He was a pretty big guy. He was bigger than me, and I'm not small. And I'm thrusting, and finally I just his lips started turning blue. And you could tell that he was, just from me holding him, like not limp, but becoming weak. I finally am like, and I gave it everything I had, and a chunk of the size of like almost a golf ball. It was pretty freaking big. Goes flying out, and then all the neat things that happened after that. He ended up throwing up, and the poor guy, like it was just something that I just tapped, and I'm like, are you okay? Do you need me to call for medical? And I, just from training, it said, somebody call 911. And I don't think anybody did. And so I was just so caught up in like, this is not happening in front of this kid's son. It's just not happening. So afterwards, kind of have like an adrenaline dump. And then I actually had to excuse myself and go to the bathroom. I was shaking so bad. It was very scary hindsight. But during the actual event, I just didn't think anything about it. Like law enforcement, that's what we're trained. We go through so much that I don't think a lot of people understand, that we go through so much training. We see so many life-altering events. We're in the middle of so many things where all we want to do is make sure people breathe at the end of the day, that they're with their families, and that everybody's okay and they're safe. And it was pretty cool to know that at least this guy was going to have another day with his kid and his family. Then my husband had sent one of my lieutenants a message just saying, hey, I'm not sure if Jen said anything. But this is what happened. And he's like, no, she didn't say anything. I'm like,
Who gave you the commendation? Is that a government or is that your work? Who does that?
CDCR, the California Department of Corrections, actually honored me for it. So
that's awesome. Well done. Did you do the Heimlich maneuver? Is that
so? People, like, I know a lot of times when they go through CPR training, sometimes people just don't take it super serious. And first day of CPR training, you never think you're going to use it. We all think, oh my gosh, I'm going to get this. I'm going to get my little car because it's just another car that I have to do in order to do something else. My training is what allowed me to not think, but to do. I'd worked with, Department of Corrections since 2002. Prior to that, I was with the Sutter County Sheriff's Department from 98. And then I went to the Sheriff's Academy in 96. 95, I started really on my adventure down this road of law enforcement. So since then, I had taken numerous, every 2 years, taking your CPR and first aid training. You still just don't think you're going to use it.
What if today is the day that it finally is the day you got to know this?
It's when you least expect it. That day, I expected to go have brunch and cocktails with my friend.
I always wonder how hard to do it. You know what I mean? When I think about it, like if I had to do that for somebody, I've babysat little ones who've unfortunately shoved something down their throat and you have to reach down there and pull it out by hand. But for a grown human that you have to, I don't know if I would know how hard to do it.
You do it with as much force as you think you can give. You pound the back, try to see if you can cough it up. When you're burping a baby, what happens? You pound their back and they burp, right? Or puke, or right. So you kind of start with that level. With everything is always progressive. You don't start at the top and then work down, but you always start at the bottom and try to work up.
Well, and the adrenaline probably coursing through you also probably did not hurt, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I think what you said is so poignant. You said you learn it so that you don't think, you just do. You act in the moment. Your brain doesn't go, wait, what? You just do it by natural instinct.
Right.
Wow, what a story. I'm sure that guy will never take giant bites of his food again. This world is so full up of terrible that we have to celebrate the good, and we have to celebrate the good doers, because if we don't, we will drown in the terrible. And I know there are more good doers than there are bad doers, but the bad doers are really loud. Well, you're awesome, as I said before, and I really appreciate you sharing that story. It's very cool.
Telling you about it, I'm like, oh my God, am I being conceited?
Listen, I mean, there's a lot of things about telling the story and why it's important. One, again, it's great to shine the light on people who do good in the world. Two, it's badass. You got a Medal of Valor. Who can say that? Not very many people. Three, it may save somebody's life, both from the idea that they learn CPR, they learn the Heimlich, or they take some smaller bites, or whatever it is. You don't know. Everything is a ripple effect. Every moment of our lives has a cause and effect. Right. And so somebody listening might go and renew their CPR or get CPR or take smaller bites. What do you do now? You've retired.
I've been medically retired now for a little over a year. So I'm pretty active in my children's baseball. So I'm a board member with our Little League doing sponsorships. I try to bring in as much money as I can with our nonprofit. It's the first time that they've ever had somebody bring in the kind of resources that I've been able to muster. We've been able to financially give back to our community and help out with children who may be less fortunate, or kids that have more than one sibling that join, and being able to provide them with a scholarship to play ball for free. We give them a uniform. If they need equipment, we help them with their equipment. Each year we've been doing more. With our All-Stars, normally the families have to pay for everything. And we were able to really discount it this year. And then the league paid for a portion of it. I got kind of roped into being a manager of our juniors team, which are 13 and 14-year-old boys. Oh boy.
That's a lot.
Yeah, but it's been great. They're a great bunch of kids. And my thoughts are always like, if I have the energy, the time, if I have an ounce left in me, I want to give back. Because I don't want kids. I always feel like idle hands do the devil's work, especially with our inner city kids, and just keeping them busy. I feel like if you keep them busy, there's less opportunity for bad things to happen to them. And it provides them choices, shows them a skill, shows them respect, shows them how to work as a team with their peers. It builds memories and relationships. And it's sometimes the only safe environment some kids have. I played Little League from the time I was 8 until I was 14. And then I played softball in high school. So it's been super rewarding. And then, so I also have a small business where I do event planning, photography, and floral arrangements for weddings and, you know, big to-dos, and then do photography. And then I plan a lot of those events and what have you. And that's hit or miss.
What's your company called?
Moments Captured by Jen. I love it. It's something that is so different from prison. It allows me opportunity to be creative. So then I decided to go back to work part-time with elementary. I will tell you, I've only been doing it for a couple months. I started doing crossing guard at the school. I'm now doing the meal duty supervisor and instructional assistant. Oh my gosh, the little kids, I love them.
Yeah, I assume too, with your background, you are able to catch glimpses of kids that might be in trouble and step in and help. Yeah. Absolutely.
I will tell you right from the get, there are children that I could tell you right now, if it wasn't such a confidential situation where you could go and step in, I could literally, I guarantee you could point to several children. And I'm pretty certain I'd be spot on. So what I do is I try to just be present when I'm around them. And these are things that I've learned from these teachers. I will tell you, I have such a respect for teachers. I don't necessarily for their association, but I absolutely do for the teachers that go out there.
Yeah, for sure.
The tools they have and the things that they come up with and how quickly they do it. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, how does your brain work that quick?
They're on the front line. They're definitely, I don't know. It's such a humongous job.
It is.
Desperately unappreciated, unfortunately, by many. I really appreciate that you took the time to speak with me, and
thank you.
I think you're a badass, really.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thanks. Yeah. You have to have some sort of strength in you in order to get through some of the things. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. So
people listening, I think that anyone listening, who is going through some things, I hope that they hear your story and know that they can make it to the other side.
I agree. I hope that if there's anything that comes from this, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity. That is so kind for you to think that my life has enough interest to maybe impact somebody. Then I have to give thanks to God, because he's the only one that's got me through all of this and helped me, show me the pathways that I needed to go to not give up on myself, and just letting people know that, there's fight. If you just live real deep down inside of you, there's fight. And this life is worth living for, no matter how deep and how desperate and how dark it seems. If you just open your eyes, you will at some point see the light. But you have to change.
Yeah. And hang on.
I love it. Hang on, human.
Jennifer, thank you.
Thank you. You're awesome.
You're awesome. Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
You take care. Bye-bye.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.